Well, good morning. I'm Mike Nardolilli, the Executive Director of the Interstate Commission on the Potomac River Basin, or ICPRB. Thank you for joining us this morning. We are here today to discuss the resiliency of the water supply to our nation's capital. Ben Franklin once said, "When the well is dry, we know the worth of water." Well, our well is the Potomac River. What would happen if the water supply from the Potomac River became unavailable due to drought or a contamination event? Well, in 1940, the Congress authorized the creation of the Interstate Commission on the Potomac River Basin, that is a compact of the 5 jurisdictions in the Potomac watershed: Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and D.C. The original focus of the Interstate Commission, maybe I'll wait till the plane goes. The original focus of the Interstate Commission on the Potomac River Basin was addressing the pollution in the Potomac River, which is the sole source of drinking water to our nation's capital. In many ways, a river runs through us. After a severe drought in 1966 that reduced the flow of the Potomac to its lowest level ever recorded, Congress asked ICPRB to expand their scope to ensure that our nation's capital had an adequate supply of water for drinking, hygiene, and fire suppression. Today, we are sharing a report commissioned by ICPRB that spells out the economic impact of losing access to the water supply from the Potomac River and calling for congressional action to invest in water resiliency so that we may safeguard the region from this impact. So what is the economic impact of our region, and what can be done to make our water supply more resilient to drought and contamination? This morning we'll be exploring those 2 questions with a series of experts. After we have heard from the distinguished panel, we will then entertain questions. So first, I would like to welcome the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments Board Chair and District of Columbia Council Member Charles Allen up to the podium to provide some remarks.
Good morning, everyone. All right, how many people took a shower this morning? All right, that's a personal question. How many people made the coffee this morning? Made some tea, right? You don't think about the water very much until you don't really have it, right? We have an expectation that we're just going to turn the faucet, turn that spigot on, and healthy, clean, safe drinking water is going to come out of it. But boy, do we feel it when it's not actually happening. Before I began my career as an elected official, I worked in public health. And one of the first things you are taught as you study public health is the story of Broad Street in London and about epidemiology and studying the cholera outbreak that took place because of contaminated water. And one of the things you learn is a deep appreciation for clean drinking water and why it is so important and vital, and why we have to constantly work with our partners at DC Water and across the entire region to make sure we know that we've got confidence in clean, safe drinking water. I'm very excited to be here along the Washington Channel, right here in Ward 6 on the wharf, and this is the confluence of the Anacostia and the Potomac Rivers. Where we are is, frankly, one of the main reasons this location was chosen to be our nation's capital, because we understood how important our water is to our future, to our country, and to a thriving space. But we also know that these issues and this water affects our entire region. Water feels fairly abundant as we look out on these rivers, but we actually are very vulnerable to disruption in our water supplies. And if that happens, it would have very far-reaching consequences to the residents of the District of Columbia, as well as our neighbors in Virginia and in Maryland. This really underscores how important we have to view this as a regional and interconnected issue. Here in DC, the Potomac River supplies 100% of our drinking water. The same is true for nearby Arlington County. And while an event may seem to affect only a specific jurisdiction, the outages have rolling effects across the entire region in all of our areas. And I think it underscores why it's so important that we have to have regional collaborations to safeguard our water resources, and why the Council of Governments, as the regional organization that brings all of these jurisdictions and all of these leaders together, are so engaged in thinking through how do we have a backup water source for our region. Our emergency preparedness planning has long evaluated our risks to our water supply, such as contaminations, think about drought. And it must be noted, we've been under a regional drought water watch since July. That is our first in 14 years. So we know that climate change and the abnormal and extreme weather associated with it is only going to increase our need for resiliency for our water. And for folks that may think of this as like, well, this is just kind of this far off exercise that you might be thinking about. That's not true. It may feel like an outrageous scenario that we're talking about, but Mexico City just spent most of this year planning for and dealing with an alarming shortage of drinking water. It still hasn't been totally resolved. It's an alarming example of how much access to water cannot be taken for granted. Collaborating with area water utilities, our local governments, the Interstate Commission on the Potomac River Basin, COG has been helping to lead the effort to obtain federal funding and support to diversify our water supply and increase capacity for the region's system. This isn't just a local issue. This is a national and federal issue. This spring, we were pleased to announce that the Energy and Water Appropriations Bill, approved by Congress and signed by President Biden, contained funding for a backup water source study, which is going to be undertaken by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in coordination with the Council of Governments, ICPRB, and all of our partners. And I think this study is going to be a vital first step in an effort to include designing, building, and operating an additional water supply and storage. We're very grateful to our entire regional congressional delegation in laying the groundwork to develop a backup water source. Our region's going to have to look to their commitment to continue making sure that this resource becomes a reality. And I think it's very clear that now is the time we have to address our persisting vulnerabilities that are outlined in today's report. We are not going to regret being proactive and forward-looking on critical issues like water access for the millions of residents, to make sure you can always have that cup of coffee, make sure you can always take that shower in the morning, and have access to our clean and safe drinking water across the entire region. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Charles. Next, I would like to ask Jack McDougall, President and CEO of the Greater Washington Board of Trade, to provide his thoughts.
Oh, great. Thanks, Michael. And as much as I'm pleased to be here this morning, I'm looking forward to coming back once we solve this problem. It seems like we have a lot of issues that we're grappling with in this region, and as has been pointed out by Charles, we think a lot about infrastructure in this region, but we tend to think about transit, transportation, our airports as planes fly over. We don't often think about our water infrastructure. Yet it is a significant vulnerability, and this is a sobering report, and I appreciate all the effort that has gone into pulling this together, as well as the efforts to work with Congress and other partners to address these deficiencies. What's most sobering about this report, beyond the health, wellness, and community impacts, it's the impacts on business and what this would do to our economy. The estimates are staggering. More than $6 billion in 2 weeks, $15 billion in a month. That's traumatic for our region, and not just for broadly business, but in particular small businesses, minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and veteran-owned businesses, because oftentimes they're the most vulnerable, and they don't have the capacity to deal through something as traumatic as that. So we have to really pay attention to that. So while we focus on economic growth and global competitiveness, we have to have a reliable water infrastructure to do that. That's not just an economic issue, it's also a national security issue. And so we implore Congress and others to provide the resources necessary to address this issue. And we look forward to working with all our partners to ensure that that happens, so that our region can continue to thrive and our communities can be safe and well. So with that, thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Our next speaker I'm pleased to introduce is David Gattis, CEO and General Manager of DC Water.
Thank you very much, Michael, for the introduction. And Councilmember Allen, you kind of stole a lot of my thunder, so we're going to take you on the road with us at DC Water, so we truly appreciate it. One of the things we talk about at DC Water is we tell individuals, try going a day without water, just one day. And you will see that water is truly life. So let me start out first of all saying good morning to each and every one of you, and thank you for joining us this morning and paying attention to this very, very important issue that we have in the front of us. DC Water's motto is, as I stated earlier, water is life. Water is truly life here in the District of Columbia. It reflects how serious we are at DC Water as the authority for the district in supplying water to our customers. You know, our job is to supply our customers with an abundant, safe, and reliable source of water. A key piece of that commitment is strengthening DC Water's resiliency to guard against potential risk, such as disruptions to our water supply. Many of you may not know, or you may know, that over the last 60 days or so, we've had an issue where we could have had disruption to our water supply. We had an algal bloom in the Potomac. We also had an oil spill up on one of the rivers that was coming towards the Potomac. All of these cause issues for us in supplying drinking water to the District of Columbia. If we do have an issue here in the District of Columbia at the Washington Aqueduct, we have approximately less than 24 hours of water in supply. 24 hours of water. This is why this is such an important subject for us here at DC Water. Resilience in the water sector, is truly one of our 5 imperatives in our strategic plan, and we take this very, very serious from that standpoint. It is crucial not only for our success, but also for the health and the well-being of the customers who depend on DC Water because of that. We are always refining our response plans, also coordinating with the district stakeholders to ensure we are prepared for any future challenges that may come down the Potomac River. We work very, very hard in our partnership with the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments to establish also the source water monitoring for early warning detection. We are looking for anything in the Potomac River that could cause a problem when we're processing water, manufacturing water for the District of Columbia. As some of you, as some of my colleagues have also emphasized in their remarks today, addressing these challenges requires more than just our efforts. Congress has a special opportunity at this point in time to act and help secure our region's water supply so that we have a chance to avoid the catastrophes that may impact us here in the District of Columbia. I look forward to the Army Corps of Engineers and also COG, the report coming out soon, but also the report that you see today shows many things that we need to do in the District of Columbia to secure our water source. Thank you very much for having me here this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Next, I would like to introduce May Stevens. She's the CEO of the American Business Water Coalition.
Thank you, Michael. As Michael mentioned, my name is, that's a little bit shorter than Michael. My name is May Stevens, and I'm the CEO of the American Business Water Coalition. The coalition provides a platform for businesses across the country to advocate for increased investment in water infrastructure because the entire economy and all of society is dependent on our nation's water. It's truly an honor to be here today with such distinguished leaders to shine a light on such a pressing problem, the threat to our water supply. We are calling on Congress to prioritize and fund the critical water infrastructure projects that will strengthen the resilience of the DC water region and safeguard our economic well-being. This report makes clear a disruption to our nation's water supply, or to our region's water supply, would have catastrophic and long-term economic consequences for the nation's capital. It would impact key government operations, vital industries, employers of all sizes, and the livelihoods of countless residents, all of whom depend on these services. And to be clear, $15 billion economic loss in just 1 month is 10 times what the federal government spends per year at protecting the entire nation's drinking water supply. It's 10 times what the federal government spends every year, just in 1 month in our city. While the report highlights the DC region, it serves as a powerful reminder that the federal investment in water infrastructure is crucial to protecting communities across the country from the severe economic impacts of infrastructure failures. Let's be real, this is a big challenge. Modernizing our nation's water systems to meet the needs of our growing economy will cost more than $1 trillion. And that's a burden that communities and local governments, local businesses cannot shoulder alone. Congress must recognize this as an urgent priority and take action to close this gap. I commend ICPRB on this report, which clearly outlines the risks to our region if we do not act now. The benefits of investing in our nation's water infrastructure are also very clear. For those of you here with us in person, just look around you. All of the economic growth that you see standing on this dock would not have been possible without the investment in water infrastructure. In fact, adequate investment in water infrastructure would increase GDP by $4.5 trillion and create 800,000 new jobs. Our message is simple. Investing in water infrastructure is not just about pipes hidden underground. It's about protecting our communities, growing our economy, and building our future. Thank you.
Thanks, May. And thanks to Charles, Jack, and David for your perspectives to provide valuable insights into the necessity of securing a resilient water supply for our region. But now we'll focus in on what are the numbers, what is the economic impact of losing access to the Potomac River. And so at this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Keith Waters, Assistant Director of the Center for Regional Analysis and the Stephen S. Fuller Institute at George Mason University. Dr. Waters' applied research focuses on key topics relevant to the Washington region, including labor market, housing, and infrastructure. He'll now provide an overview of the report's findings, and that we have copies of the reports here. And so I'll turn it over to Dr. Wool. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm part of the study team with Dr. Terry Clow and Tanya Neves. I think it's been made pretty clear that, in addition to water being life, water is also the economy. That's pretty abundantly clear at this point. And so what we've done is we've just tried to estimate the impacts of what would happen if water were to be shut off for 24 hours, for a week, for a month, for 4 months. And so a natural starting place to figure out what the economic impacts might be are to recognize that water is used there's two variations in which water is used as an input into the economy. You have it differentiates by sector, but then it also varies over time. So you can imagine it is the case that leisure and hospitality is far more reliant on water than somebody in research like myself, right? If I'm sitting at my desk, I don't need necessarily water to read reports, to write reports, and this type of stuff. If you're cooking, if you're cleaning, you have to have water. You cannot go very long without it, right? So the reliance on water varies by industry. In addition, the reliance on water varies over time, right? You might be able to make do for an hour or two, but maybe not a day, maybe not a week. So industrial resilience also varies over time, okay? In addition, what we consider in this report is the fact that DC's economy is unlike any other economy in the country. We are heavily focused on professional and business service sector. We have, we're federal contractors, we're federal government. We're not necessarily, producing cars and all of this other type of stuff. So our industrial structure is unique to the rest of the country. So what we've done in this report is effectively married those two things. We take the reliance on water by various sectors of the economy, and we weigh the economic output of our industrial structure. As people have mentioned, you're not going to make it very long producing stuff, whatever it is, whether it's reports or pharmaceuticals or whatever it may be, without some water inputs. And so what we do is we're going to weight the industrial structure by this economic loss and then tally that back up for the regional total. As people have, as some of the people have mentioned previously, the economic output is staggering. For DC alone, after 1 month, the economic output loss would be about $6 billion. And that's just the economic output loss. That's not including tax revenue. Okay, so tax revenue would be about $227 million total just for DC, which includes a loss of $161 million for the federal government and then another $66 million for the District of Columbia, right? So over 1 month, the revenue losses, in addition to the lost economic output, is pretty staggering. I would like to make a caveat on some of this, is that there's a number of forces that would clearly influence these results. Obviously, the federal government would step in sort of with military action, and they would bring water in to, effectively smooth over some of the transition. You'd have bottled water and this type of stuff, depending on, how much and how forceful that action would be, would impact these estimates as well. But more importantly, is hybrid work, okay? And this is a double-edged sword. Hybrid work would allow workers, particularly given our industrial structure on professional and business services, it would allow our region's economy to continue to function. However, some people might start to leave the region in order to do their work. And if they left, and this is where the double-edged sword comes in, if some of these people left, they might not rely on the DC region, and some of that business may never come back. So in the short term, it might be a solution, but in the longer term, it actually could have lasting economic impacts on our region. While we don't explicitly consider the impacts in the report, it is clear that it would have disproportionate impacts on less advantaged communities, and specifically, smaller businesses would be more likely to be impacted. Smaller businesses have fewer flex workers that could deal with the impacts, and also smaller businesses are going to be less likely to be insured or carry smaller insurance, and so smaller businesses would be more severely impacted. Second, the businesses owned by women, minorities, and veterans have been shown to be disproportionately impacted during severe disasters. Losing water would not be an exception to this rule. If we lost water for any amount of times, these businesses would be more likely to close. In addition, and this is something that is explicitly considered in the report, is that the least likely workers, the workers least able to respond to such an event would be the most severely impacted. Okay, so if we consider the resilience by industry, and we break them effectively in half, and we look at the least resilient industries and the most resilient industries, workers in the least resilient industries are going to be, let me restate that. Workers in less resilient industries pay lower wages. Okay, so this would result in those workers having, basically disproportionate effects. Workers in the less resilient industries pay about $61,000 per year. Workers in more resilient industries pay $117,000 per year. Now that is effectively sort of a split between, workers in leisure and hospitality and professional and business services sector, but the workers most in need would also be the most impacted. And finally, and I'll just kind of end on this because I don't want to bore you with numbers too much, but most of the numbers that I've already stated are just for the DC's economy, not necessarily the region. We are a region, as has been stated several times. You have Arlington Water, you have Fairfax Water, and you have the Washington Suburban Sanitation Commission. There is some, backup water in the case of these things. The study team worked with some of these water commissions and estimated the impacts for the region after just 1 month. The impact for the region as a whole would be $14 billion in lost output and $652 million in lost taxes, which includes federal, state, as well as local. So that would include, Montgomery County, Prince George's County, Arlington, Fairfax, and so forth. And with that, I will hand it back to Michael for additional comments.
Okay, thank you, Keith. So we're now at that point in the program, and I just want to highlight two facts there. One is that we're talking about $15 billion of impact in a month, and then also 5 million people depend on the Potomac River in one way or another for their drinking water, so 5 and 15. So anyway, right now we're at the point of the program where to entertain any questions. We have our experts here, and we have other folks here who could answer any questions that you may have.